I think we're live. We are live. Yeah.
All right.
Okay. So welcome everyone to Entree Live. My name is Chris Grice, new host. And today I have with me my good friend Joey Coakley.
Hello.
Introduce yourself, Joey.
Yeah, sure. I'm Joey Coakley. I'm a solutions architect on the Avi Center of Excellence team at VMware. I'm on the same team as Chris. And so we share in similar disciplines, and but he's kind of taking the Kubernetes side of things, and I'm here to perhaps learn a bit and ask some questions for the unaware.
Yeah, thanks, man. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at sort of last time I did this, we looked at AKO and how to install that on-prem with sort of TKG and sort of Helm. But today what we're going to do is sort of look more into the public cloud and also look at AMKO and sort of build a, sort of a multi-site application where we're going to have, one application in GKE, one application, the same application in AWS on EKS. And then we're going to build sort of a GSLB virtual service with AMKO and AKO between them. Hey, Zinky, hope you're fine. But yeah, that's what we're going to do. And without further ado, let's do that. So first of all, I'm going to move all this out of the way. And so thought we'd start off with a few slides, just 3 slides, just to sort of what is AMKO. So what it basically is, it's basically tying in Kubernetes to Avi's GSLB system. Avi, as we've all talked about before, is a pretty good enterprise-grade load balancer. Comes with global server load balancing. So fundamentally what we're doing is we're tying the Avi Kubernetes operator, which is providing ingress and service-type load balancer to your various clusters. Here we've got GKE, but it could be AKS, it could be EKS, it could be TKGS, it could be TKGM, it could be OpenShift, it could be vanilla Kubernetes, most Kubernetes distributions we support. And AMKO, what it does is it talks to the Avi controller, but it also talks to the individual clusters. And so if I deploy applications in sort of site 1, site 2, and site N, I can bring all of those ingresses together behind one sort of global service. What we're actually going to do today is we've got a GKE clusters. We've got 2 of them, in fact, one on sort of multi-region, one on the West Coast, one on the East Coast, and then we also have a EKS cluster. And Joey, I don't know what region that's in.
It's in Ohio, US East 2 and AWS. Okay.
So that's pretty central, right? Well, I guess it's more to the East Coast, isn't it? But yeah. So we kind of have a multi-regional application, and one of the cool things about AMKO, GSLB, is that we can configure it. We can customize the configuration. I can do things like traffic weighting. I don't have it here, but we can do priority splitting. So we could make the 2 GKE clusters active, and then we could make the EKS cluster sort of standby, and we'll look at doing that. I could also do geo load balancing between my 2 GKE clusters and make the second one a standby as well. So there's quite a lot of options that we can choose here. And so what we're going to do today is we're just going to walk through the sort of installation of AMKO, tie it into our different clusters. I already have an app deployed. We'll tie it into the controller, and we'll just figure it out as we go along.
Sounds good.
Cool. Let me get rid of this. Give me 1 second. Okay. So what I'm actually going to do is, well, yeah, we'll start here. So let me just clear this out of the way.
Maybe increase your font just a little bit. Cool. That's good.
Okay. Okay. So to begin with, how does AMKO work? So I'm actually going to split the screen here. Let's just minimize this down a bit. Getting there slowly but surely. So I'm just going to have sort of the Avi controller here and my Kubernetes piece underneath. So what I have on the top screen is I have a Avi controller in GKE, not GKE, in GCP. Additionally, this is my leader GSLB controller. Also have another GSLB controller in AWS. So I have two sites basically. The GCP controller is the leader, and basically it's pushing configurations down to the standby cluster. But AMKO itself, it's going to talk to the leader controller. And so how does it do that? Fundamentally, it's just a Helm chart. It's very much like AKO. In fact, one of the requirements is that we have AKO installed in each cluster. So if I look at my clusters here, I'm in East Cluster 1, and I can do a get pods -n Avi system, and you can see AKO is running there. And then if I go into cluster 2, I can run the same command, and after a small delay, you can see that AKO is running there as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to install my controllers on the East Coast. So I'm going to install AMKO into my East Coast cluster because it should really be sort of similar to the same site that the GSLB leader is. So go back into here.
And so this is kind of one of those important distinctions, like it's pretty simple here, but whereas with AKO, you have AKO running in each one of your clusters, you only have a single copy of AMKO running for the entire topology.
Yeah, correct. Absolutely. Yeah, good point. Good point. We can you can run another one in like a sort of almost federated manner. But it really isn't. You're not really running two full pods. You're just basically running one in another site, waiting for it to. If one site fails, then you can spin up another one. Mm-hmm. But yeah, generally you just have the one AMKO.
Yeah.
And the thing to recognize as well, in very much the same way of AKO, you're not in the data plane, i.e., you're in the control plane. So, you know, if AMKO goes down, it's not actually going to affect any sort of existing services.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, what do we need to do to install a AMKO? The first thing we need to do is create a secret. And we create that secret. I've actually done that already, but the secret is formed out of a file we've created from the various different configs. So we've taken the kube configs from the two GKE clusters and the AKS cluster. We've merged them together, and we've created a secret called GSLB config secret. And that secret is how AMKO is actually going to access those other clusters. So we'll have a quick look at that. So I've got a few other. I actually don't know if this was the one we use now. Yeah, this is it. So we have a few. There's a few other clusters in here that we're not using today, but the ones we are using are GKE1, GKE2, and then our AWS one is GSLB admin. So those are the three clusters we're talking about. So once I've created that secret, and if I just show you the secret. what I'm basically going to do is I'm going to install AMKO into the Avi system namespace. That namespace was already created when we did AKO. So, that's already there. And I use a values file to do it. So that's already, I've got that already, but we can have a quick walk through.
So just like thinking through in terms of where AMKO is reaching out to and how it's doing that. So whereas with AKO, you would be installing in a Kubernetes cluster and you can just sort of really, the only auth that you care about is authenticating to your respective controller. AMKO's task is like, since it is just one to control multiple clusters,
yes,
you're responsible for both tying it back to the GSLB leader node, in addition to allowing that pod to be able to authenticate to the various Kubernetes clusters.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So in terms of like your dependencies, wherever that pod is running, it must be able to communicate with those Kubernetes clusters. Like you have to be able to.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So let's just have a quick look at it. For some reason, it kicked me out of the jump box, which is funny.
You did lag for a second there. I lost your audio.
Oh yeah, maybe it's my internet. Kids downstairs wrecking the joint, no doubt. So.
Just disable your kids' internet access. It's fine.
Then they'll disable mine.
Goes around, comes around.
Yeah. So this is the values file for AMKO. So it's a typical sort of Helm chart values file. Things to note. So I mentioned earlier that federation piece. It's going to run every time. So within the pod itself, it's actually a stateful set. But when the pod builds, the deployment builds, there's actually two containers within the AMKO pod. One is AMKO itself, and the other one is the federator. And so if you wanted to run federation, then basically this is how you do that. So you tell it which cluster you're in. So in my instance, I'm in GKE1 GSLB. And, is this current cluster the leader? Yes, it is. But if I was going to have a federated cluster, I would, I'd have the same config, but I'd have GKE2 GSLB as the current cluster. And then my current cluster is leader would be set to false. So that's really the key difference there. And then I'm setting the member cluster. So I have all three member clusters in there. Then we get to a couple of sort of CRDs that we're going to configure. We're going to configure, the first CD is called the global configs. And fundamentally what this is doing is this is really telling us where the Avi controller is, the controller version. Again, it wants to know the member clusters, what log level we're going to need. And a really cool, interesting piece is this use custom global FQDN. So what this does is it enables us to have obviously in my ingress definition, I've set one host. So in my case, for example, I'll give an example of this. This here, vip1.site1.avi.com, that's my actual ingress configuration, in my host and my TLS host. And then the second GKE cluster has vip1.site2. But what this custom global FQDN enables me to do is I can have a separate domain for my global services. So I can have a domain for my global services, and I can have a domain for my local services. The actual domain itself is configured with AKO via the host rule CRD, but to use it in GSLB, we turn this flag on here, and it actually gives you an idea of how to configure that on the host rule CRD for AKO. So there's a spec.virtualhost.gslb.fqdn field, and that's where you're putting in this FQDN, this vip1.amko.avi.us, and we're matching off that to create the virtual service. I'm also passing in the credentials of the controller so I can talk to the leader. And then another key piece is this in the GDP, the global deployment policy. We have an app selector or a namespace selector. And what these do is they tell AMKO to, build that global virtual service. So on an app selector, and that's what I'm actually using in this example, an application selector is basically in the it's in the key, and it's in the ingress, for example, and it must match this label key value. So here it's got GSLB, yes. But additionally, I can also do it on the namespace as well. So if I wanted to label an entire namespace, I can do that, and I can build GSLB virtual services for that entire namespace. And we just have a quick question. I'll show that. So what is the GSLB leader controller IP? Is it the Avi controller IP or a load balancer service in the leader? It is the GSLB leader controller IP. So in my case, it's this. It's not this IP because this is the public IP, but this is the. Am I using the public IP actually?
No, I don't think you were.
Yeah, so in this case, I'm using the GCP native IP address, but it's the IP address of the Avi controller itself. So it's not a service for the AMKO federator. And shout out to Jay. How's it going, Jay? So this is a good question.
Yeah.
What's the difference between GSL? Do you want to take that one, Joey?
Yeah, sure. Regular load balancing service, like from the perspective of Kubernetes, I suppose means one thing, but usually when you think of load balancers, you think of server load balancing. And when you think of GSLB, global server load balancing, think of it as load balancing your server load balancers. So if I have my application deployed in site A and there's a load balancer there and you're used to getting to it in whatever method, and then I have the same application in site B and it has its own respective load balancer for local server load balancing, I can then put GSLB over the top of it. So that way when GSLB is really a fancy way of saying DNS. It's like DNS with advanced policy. So when someone goes and looks up that record, I can have a policy which says I should go to this site or that site, and then I'll take the server load balancer at that respective site. So it's just sort of like a higher, it's like a tiered hierarchy, I guess you could say, of load balancing. You're load balancing the load balancers.
Yeah, just to sort of add to that, you can actually use the different algorithms to load balance those load balancers too. So you can do things sort of like, obviously GSLB is in the name, global server load balancing, but we can do, geolocation algorithms. So I can send a user to a local site, or you can do sort of persistent, you can do topology based. So there's quite a number of different ways that we can manipulate which site or yes, GSLB is the sort of load balancer.
Yes,
very true.
It's a good way of looking at it.
Yeah. So yeah, where did I get to? I think I was talking about the user. Was talking about the credentials. Oh yeah, I was talking about the app selector and the namespace selector. So this is what's telling AMKO again. To build a GSLB virtual service for any app that has this label or any namespace that has this label. So in this instance, I'm using the app selector label, but if I wanted to do an entire namespace, I could use the namespace selector. Then once again, we're going to give it the clusters, so that we're really building a couple of CRDs here, and we just need, in each CRD, we need to give it the clusters we're using for. But then, I've got a bunch of other options here where I can do traffic splitting, traffic weighting, priority between the two clusters. And the thing to note here is all of these settings here, because they're in the values file, they're going to apply globally to all of your GSLB virtual services. And we're not going to do that today. We're going to take the defaults, but then we're going to configure sort of custom GSLB host rules. And so a GSLB host rule enables me to configure these exact same fields, but I can do it on a per application basis and not on a global level.
I was gonna ask you about that. Just like this would be something like more of like you said, your global settings. I have a primary site and I have a backup site.
Yes.
And for every single application, I'm gonna treat it this way, or we can override. Now, do you know about how overrides work? Will the host rule CRD supersede this because it's more specific, or?
Correct.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
Exactly like that. Yeah. So I'm going to override anything that's put in here.
Yeah. Okay.
And you might want to do it for like so some of these you probably don't want to do. I mean, well, if you priority is actually missing here, but if you knew, for example, that you're always going to be active standby, then you could do that. That might be a good one. Also, time to live as well. If you want, maybe you'd want to set that at a global level. But things like health monitors, you're probably not going to do at a global level. Algorithm, perhaps, but not. Probably not. Site persistence, probably definitely not. So most of these fields we're going to sort of configure in the GSLB host rule. Rather than here. I mean, I actually, every time I've installed it, I leave all of this blank, and I do it with a host rules CRD, not here. So that is the values file, and now we're going to install it. I'm going to make sure I'm in the right cluster because I always install it into the wrong cluster, and then that'll be a problem. Like that meme where I'm pressing looking for the it's here some no it isn't gonna kick me out.
History.
They kick me out. We're just gonna do it live. Install. Okay. So pretty simple Helm install command. Actually, I'll walk that back a bit. So you install the Helm repo as normal, and if I do Helm search repo, you can see I basically got the AKO repo, and you can see I've got the regular AKO, got the AKO operator. This is actually out of date now, so we would never use this one. I think it was for OpenShift. This isn't actually the TKG operator, I don't think. I think this is an OpenShift operator. I'm not sure what happened to that recently, but and the AKO repo has AMKO as well. So you just add the AKO repo.
Just really quick, there's a question in the chat from Jay, but this is on 2 different GKE clusters and 1 EKS cluster.
Yeah. And it works on OpenShift as well, obviously TKG, vanilla Kubernetes, GKE, EKS, AKS. So most of the main distros, Rancher, it kind of works anywhere where Kubernetes is, most flavors of Kubernetes it will run on. But we offer support for the public cloud, offer support for the K8s, Rancher and Tansy, of course, and OpenShift. Here we go. So yeah, that's the repo. Now I can up arrow. I can't.
I don't think you can because you didn't actually run the command.
Yak. So yeah, literally installing AKO, AMKO. We're going to generate a name, which will end up being AMKO -0. I've dictated a version 161, passing in that values file that we did earlier, and sticking it in the Avi system namespace. Okay, so that has now deployed. We'll look at the eventually I'll get there. So you can see that it's up and running. And this is where you can see sort of those two containers that are actually operating in the pod. One of which is the federator and one of which is the AMKO pod itself. Typically what I'll do at this point is I'll look at the logs for AMKO. And you will see a lot of warnings because, let's just go to the top. Well, there's a lot there, but it gives you quite a few warnings because if you remember from the values file, we didn't define some of the values. For example, you can see here that traffic, no weight, no priority information. So a lot of these you can just disregard. And I think in later releases, they're actually going to make these info messages, not warning, just to remove any confusion. But that's pretty much what it's saying right now. It's saying, there was no weight defined in the values file, so throw in a warning. And that's pretty much what all of that is. And then we'll also warn on, I'm not actually sure what some of these are, but a lot of these you can disregard. So yeah, this is looking at, I actually had a TSM, Tanzu Service Mesh, running in this same controller. And so these are sort of health monitors that Tanzu Service Mesh used. And basically it's just saying that these health monitors don't match up to AMKO related health monitors. So you can sort of disregard those. And again, it's erroring here. In the future releases, a lot of these warnings are going to be sort of obfuscated and put as info messages. So you shouldn't see as many. But then you can see it's sort of connecting to the clusters and it's running through there. It's gone through the various namespaces and it's sort of saying, I've got no namespace filter, so I'm not going to do anything in these namespaces. And you can sort of see Cube System, TSM, Avi System, default. There's no label on the default namespace. And basically what it's going to do is going to go through all of the clusters that we added. So you see GKE1, GSLB, then it's going to do GKE2, GSLB, and then it's doing GSLB admin. So that's the 3 clusters we added.
And to be clear, like GSLB admin is the EKS cluster.
It is, yeah.
Your two GKE clusters, and then GSLB admin is just terribly named because that was something that I put in there.
And yeah, that's Joey's fault, not mine.
It is my fault.
So, yeah.
But up until this point, so just like kind of visualizing architecture here, you already have some host rule CRDs deployed because I could see in the logs, some of those flashing by. But in terms of like prerequisites up to this point, GSLB was already configured on the Avi controller, or
yes, yeah, good point. Yeah, so take that back a bit, I guess. GSLB was already configured, and I'd already delegated a domain. So, what is the domain?
Right. So, like when you talk about the global FQDN, when you were looking at your global settings for AMKO, you showed the AMKO.demoAviUS. And in this scenario, demoAviUS is the authoritative zone for that is at Route 53. And after you configured GSLB, you set up a delegation for AMKO.demoAviUS to point to to point to the DNS listeners here on Avi.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So the in terms of like how it all sort of comes together, then is that once your application is deployed, you have AMKO, you've pointed it at the leader GSLB controller. It has access to monitor everything it needs to within the different Kubernetes clusters. And since Avi owns that segment of DNS, we have kind of complete control over when the VIP gets provisioned, what DNS records, where we direct traffic to. So like that's how the actual traffic steering is working here, right?
Correct. Yep. Yeah, that's it. That's exactly right. At this point, everything's synced. And obviously we had our ingresses deployed already, which are these two on the GKE side. And you can, that's actually great. I was gonna, we were talking about that earlier. So Jay's got a great question. Any architecture diagram we'll go. Let's actually do that quickly. So I'm going to bring up my trustiest Excalidraw.
Your team at Excalidraw. I'm still.
Yeah, I am. So you
Draw IO, man.
You can see that I've got several.
What diagram is complete without a stick figure? I mean, it's just great.
Yeah, I'm actually going to use this one here because it's one I prepared earlier. Let's zoom.
Do it in MS Paint.
Yeah. How do I zoom in here?
A real OG.
There it is. We'll do it in MS Paint next time. Let's just put it there.
Oh, this is good. I'm glad that you actually have something here. I was thinking, man, if you're going to be sketching this live, we're going to be here for the next 10 minutes.
I did do this live. I did do this live for a customer.
Okay.
So I'm quite proud of this one.
Good.
Put it everywhere.
Nice.
But yeah, so this is actually it was a TKGI environment, and what they're doing is they had a active and standby site.
Really quick, before you get, can you scroll in a bit more? Zoom in a bit more?
Yeah.
Thank you.
How's that?
Much better. Thank you.
Yeah. And so they were, as I say, they had an active standby site, site 1, site 2, and they had workload clusters in each, workload domains in each one. And then they had as you can see, they might be active actually thinking about it. They had like sort of prod A PKS cluster in site 1 and site 2, and then prod B clusters in site 1 and site 2. And as you can see, I have sort of kind of described it as I have app A, and I want it to be I want app A to be globally available. So I want I want to sort of load balance between those two apps. And so this particular customer is actually Excel Energy, but they were using Infoblox as their upstream DNS provider. And so Infoblox, what it would do, and this could be anything, would delegate in this case, global.tkgi would delegate that that record to the Avi DNS, and the Avi DNS would be authoritative for that domain. And so what we did is we deploy AKO into each cluster. So you can see the AKO here, AKO here, AKO here, AKO here. Then the GSLB leader is down here. So the GSLB leader was in site 1, and the follower was in site 2. I installed, this is the primary AMKO, and in this instance, we are doing the federator piece, but I added the primary AMKO here. And so this primary AMKO, he's talking to the AKO in prod A, site 1, prod B, site 1, prod A, site 2, prod B, site 2. And so when I deploy my application into cluster A in site 1 and cluster A in site 2, AMKO is building that GSLB virtual service between these two applications. And so the pool member for this application is the individual ingresses. So if you can see here, my my purple-headed stickman is, I should have said that. He's talking to and it's coming in to initially the his resolver is resolving to info blocks. Info blocks is going to say, hey, I'll send you an NS record back, go to these DNS VSs.
Got to pull it together, man.
And then the DNS VSs are authoritative. Well, they're authoritative for that subdomain. And so you go to each application. Does that make sense? Is that clear?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of glossed over. There's a bit of I guess like a bit of an assumption that most folks, most that's cold-blooded, Jay. I think there's kind of a bit of an assumption that most folks know how GSLB is operating in this case, but I think at a high level, it's just at a high level, somebody delegates a subdomain to us, we're authoritative for that, and we make those routing decisions based off the queries that come out and come to us via the Avi DNS virtual service, which he has depicted in the top left of the site 1 and site 2, and based off of whatever that policy is, and then we respond back with the IP address of a VIP, usually an ingress IP in one of the respective sites.
Does Amko need access to Kube API server of all clusters? So that's a yes.
Yeah,
right.
It does.
Yeah. Yes, it does. Yeah.
That's how it reaches AKO and the other clusters, right?
Yeah. It needs access. Yeah. So you have to have AKO, and yes, you do need access. And we're giving it that access via that GSLB members kubeconfig. And I'll answer Jay's question too. The DNS delegation is very standard. Basically, it's really an NS record, that points to sort of an A record, and then those A records point to your individual sort of DNS virtual services. So if I go back to my controller here, you can see GKE DNS, and I'm ultimately going to have an NS record pointing to this. And what that NS record is doing is it's telling my local resolver to come here for the DNS resolution. And I can actually show you in Route 53 how we set that up. I'm going to change the color of the stick, man.
Was not ready for that one, man. Was not ready.
That was great. So this is our Route 53, and this is the subdomain that I'm using. So Route 53 is authoritative for demo avi.us. And in this instance, we're using AMKO. So you can see here, I've got an answer to that question in just a second. I've got an NS record for AMKO demo avi.us, and that NS record has these two A records, AMKO NS1 and AMKO NS2. And then I have that A record. Each one of these points to an A record, and you'll notice 35.227.114.19. That is this guy here. So that's fine. So it doesn't need a public-facing IP as long as they can route in between. So if you can route in between your clusters, then you don't have to have a public IP. So yeah, let's actually look what we created. Hopefully we created something.
Yeah.
And we did. So I have, this is the GSLB virtual service that we created. And you can see that my three members are here. So I've got cluster 1, GKE, VIP1, site 1, VIP2, and there's my EKS cluster. So these two are down because our routing's a bit messed up between AWS and GKE. Didn't quite have time to fix that, but if you sort of that would normally be up, but you can see that one of the things that is quite cool about this is, and this came up with ADT yesterday in Google, is one of the advantages Avi has in sort of the public cloud is a lot of times the public cloud ingress controller isn't, or GSLB controller isn't quite as feature rich as Avi did. For example, Google couldn't do this. They couldn't do multi-region GSLB tied into ingress with sort of WAF. They couldn't combine all of those things together. And so, Avi was able to fulfill that need. And and tie that into the fact that your GSLB ingress setup, load balancer setup, for example, now looks the same across on-prem, all public cloud, etc. That can be quite a compelling reason to go down the AMKO AKO route. What else can we look at? I was thinking about doing a host rule.
Yeah, why don't you show the actual ingress and the host rule CRD that was used to generate this this GSLB VIP.
Yeah.
Because up until now, everything that you've shown was just really laying the foundation for the infra as far as AMKO and its dependencies. But okay, assuming that all that stuff is done, I'm a developer. I want to make my application global. How does that?
Yeah, good point. So first of all, I need a application, right? So here I've got a I've got a deployment. It's just running a Docker container. Well, not Docker. It's just running a container with running the Hackathon app, which is a very insecure app, and we use it to test WAF. In front of that, I have a no port service in this instance, but it could be a cluster IP service. I'm just using no port in this instance. I've got a secret containing my certificate and key, but I'm actually going to change that. I changed that with the host rule CRD as well. And then I have an ingress. And the key thing is this is the piece that's telling AMKO to kick in, basically.
Really quick, I also saw in your service definition that you had GSLB set to yes. Was that unnecessary or is that necessary?
Yeah, so that's a great point, actually. So the reason I have this here is because I changed this service from a load balancer service to a no port service.
Okay.
So if you were using load balancer, you would have this here as well.
I see. From if you were doing an L4 load balancer or an Avi.
So you can you can do GSLB with layer 4 as well. So that's a good use case here too.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So the refresher there is if you have AKO installed and you deploy a service of service type load balancer, we're going to create an L4 VIP on the Avi side.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and just a regular ingress. So this is already applied, and then what I do to manipulate the ingress itself is I have a host rule CRD, which is sort of an Avi specific CRD. You can see the API up the top there, kind host rule, and this is matching to what's the host in the ingress, and then the piece that's sort of turning on that GSLB FQDN is the vip1.amko. This GSLB.fqdn. I can also do a lot of cool stuff here. You've got WAF policy. I don't have to have my secret in Kubernetes. I can reference a certificate here. And then I'm sort of turning on all of Avi's analytics. But this is the key piece here. That's turning on that custom GSLB.
Yeah, it's nice that you don't have to have a completely separate GSLB host rule CRD. It's already using the existing host rule. If you installed AKO and you're already using host rule CRDs as part of your standard load balancing or ingress solution, it's using the same CRD for GSLB. Or is there also another GSLB?
There is a GSLB host.
Okay. I spoke too soon. Okay.
Yeah, but just to turn on the GSLB virtual service, then yeah, you just to turn on that sort of custom FQDN and use the default settings, you just use the hostful CRD.
Okay.
What we can do, let's configure a GSLB hostful kind of live, because I don't have a good example to hand, so we're just gonna kind of make it up as we go along. I'm just gonna get the document. Give me 1 second. So we'll just call it GSLB hostful.yaml, and where is it? So what I want to use this to do is currently you can see that all of these pull priorities are equal. So what I'm actually doing here is I'm round robining between all of these. These are all active. Basically, my application is active. And so what I want to do is perhaps I'll change. I want to change this to be active standby. And so what I can do is, let's insert, that will help. What I need to do is, in the spec FQDN, we're going to change that to my GSLB virtual service. So we're going to put that as bit1.amko.demoavi.us. We're then going to, we're not going to do site persistence. So I'm just going to comment those lines out for now. We don't need third-party members. So this is actually quite unique as well, because if my ingress is sat behind a non-Avi load balancer, or I want to add a different VIP to my GSLB virtual service, for example, I can actually do this by IP here. So say I had I'd hate to say it, contour ingress, and I had that VIP IP, I can actually add it here with the third-party members and say site and the, I'd have to add the site to my GSLB infrastructure, but I'm able to use sort of non-Avi load balancers for this piece. Of course, in this instance, I don't have any, but like if you do have some, you could use that here. Here we can change the health monitor. Currently, I'm using, let's see what we are using. So currently I'm using the AMKO created one, but if we wanted to change it to sort of this one here, system GSLB, HTTPS, I just need to add that in there. We'll do that too, because why not? More things to break live. That's probably what's going to happen. And then I'm going to delete that line. And so here's where I can change sort of my priorities. I've already forgotten what the. Do you remember what the clusters are called?
One is called GSLB admin, and then the other one is GKE1 GSLB and GKE2 GSLB.
GKE1 GSLB. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my GKE clusters active, and then we'll make the EKS cluster a standby cluster. The way we do that is we do that with priorities. So the higher the priority, that's the one we're going to choose. So what I'll do is I'll make this priority 3, and we'll set the time to live to 1. Just giggles. I'm going to leave the algorithm as default right now, but this is where I could change geolocation, topology, things of that nature. I can, I can change my algorithm here as well.
Also, that's the algorithm for the pool, and it doesn't by default, isn't each site its own pool?
So
because like when you're doing priority, right, you're going between different.
Yeah, so these will be the same pool, and this one will be the different pool. So by using priority by default, I'm doing priority load balancing. So this piece is only changing the pool load balancing algorithm, not.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that each of the pools only have a single member.
This pool will have 2 members because the priority is the same. So there'll be 2 pools. This one will have 2 pool members, and this one will have 1.
Let's see like when you apply it. Let's take a look at your GSLB config, because I'm expecting 3 pools, 2 of which have the same priority, and you're going to round robin, and a third pool which has a lower priority, which would be EKS.
If you're wrong, you owe me a beer.
Deal.
So it didn't take.
Lovely.
Let's see why it didn't take. I'm in the right cluster, right? Yeah. So I should have prepared this one a bit better earlier, it seems.
It seems maybe it doesn't like.
Yeah, it doesn't like
health monitor.
Please, let's just change that then. Not sure why I didn't like that, but investigate that later. I really just want to get my beer. So.
All right.
Important piece. I still didn't take it.
Oh, no, I guess you do have to have a health monitor defined.
That's odd though, because it should have the. So it did change the health monitor, it just didn't change the priority. That's interesting.
You can just scroll down from here and go look at your pool members.
The priority hasn't changed.
Well, what I'm interested in is you buying me a beer. So if you edit this and scroll down.
So they're all part of the same pool.
Shit! Oh, this man a beer. God.
So it still hasn't worked though, because
the
priority should have changed.
But I see what you're saying, because once you change the priority, then it has to separate out into a separate pool.
Right.
Okay, I see now.
Yeah. Kind of annoyed that it's not working though. How much time we got left?
Wait, you have to uncomment the key.
Did I not do that?
The health monitor refs.
Oh, I know why it is. I'm using the older version. They fixed this in 171. And I'm not using 171. But I'm just going to change it globally.
171 fix something with the GSLB.
Yeah, it doesn't honor the host rule. Why did I change that? See, I should have put this in. It's only the GBP then. Okay, cool then. Just gonna steal this. Hopefully this will do it. We will see, find out there. My indentation looks good. Yeah, it's totally changed. Look at the top.
Yep.
Perfect. Oh, you were right. Or has it? Let me see. No, I've got two pools. There you go.
Yeah.
So two pools, one priority. So yeah, if I was using the later version of AMKO, would have been able to do this with a GSLB host rule and could do it on a per app basis. But I hope you can see that that's how we can manipulate things to be active, standby, things of that nature.
So if you were to dig at your DNS listener, you would consistently only get
that's
group pool.
Yeah, so this is GKE cluster 1 and 70 is GKE cluster 2. So these are these two.
So that's just showing that the EKS is never brought into the picture. But if you were to go and now flip the logic in your GDP, you should consistently get EKS.
Exactly.
And like that's just an easy way of controlling it, steering it from the Kubernetes side too.
We'll do that as the last thing we do because of right at time. So I have now changed the priority of the GSLB admin to 5. So now it's it's higher priority than the others. Has it updated yet? Hasn't. Is that right?
It just hasn't taken it.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. That's what will happen. It's just taken a while to update by the looks of it. But yeah, you're absolutely right. That's what should happen.
Yeah, and it also helps to run the correct latest version of AMKO with because you're running AKO 171.
Yeah,
usually they're pretty close
Yeah.
together, right? Like,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and that's about it. So we're right at time. Really hope that was useful and interesting. And see everybody next time. Thank you, Joey.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.